your autistic child or your neurodivergent teen asks for a sex toy, that can make your stomach drop pretty fast. And look, I get it. After more than 30 years in sexual health, there's still topics that can hit a parent straight in the nervous system before the brain is properly caught up. And with autistic kids in particular, this can get trickier because sometimes what sounds like a sexual question is actually a privacy question, a sensory question, a body curiosity question, or a child just using a word they don't fully understand yet. So before you panic, I want to help you slow it right down. And I need to say this up front. In some places, it may actually be illegal to buy a toy, a sex toy for a minor. So before you even get into whether you want to allow it or not, you need to check the law where you live. In this video, I'll walk you through what to think about first, what makes this harder with autistic kids, and the calm filter I'd use before saying yes or no. So sex toys. This is one of those questions that can send a parent's mind straight to worst case scenario in about 2 seconds. You hear the words and suddenly your brain's racing. Where did they hear that? Why are they asking? Is this normal? Have I missed something? Is this something I should be worried about? And the problem is not that you feel shocked. The problem is that you're answering from shock. And what I see a lot is parents reacting to the meaning they've assigned before they've actually worked out what the child actually means. And this is usually when the whole conversation starts going downhill. I've seen parents hear one loaded phrase and immediately assume the biggest possible meaning, and then later realize that their child was asking something much simpler or heard a word somewhere and was trying to make sense of it. So before you answer the question, you need to work out what the real question is. So what are they actually asking? And this is where I want parents to slow right down and get curious instead. It's not dramatic, not panicked, just be curious, because I want a sex toy can mean a lot of different things. And if you answer the wrong question, you're not actually helping your child. It might mean they saw something online, that they heard a word from a friend, are asking about masturbation, are curious about pleasure, or are noticing body sensations. They want privacy, or they're asking about something adults have. And sometimes, especially with neurodivergent kids, they may be asking something sensory rather than sexual. So instead of jumping into a speech, try something simple like, "What do you mean by that?" Or "What made you think of that?" Or "Tell me what you think that is." Or "Tell me why you want one." And that keeps the door open, and that matters because the goal here is not to shut conversation down. The goal is to stay askable. So let's look at why this is different with autistic kids. And I want to be really clear that this is not just general parenting advice with the word autistic slapped on top, because autistic kids often process these topics differently. And if you miss that, you can respond badly to a question that actually needed a much calmer read. Sometimes autistic kids use very direct language, and that can make questions sound or feel more loaded than it is. Sometimes they're asking for literal information, and sometimes they're focused on the body sensations in a way that is more sensory than sexual. And sometimes they're just curious, but don't have all the social context that adults assume they have. And sometimes they do not know what they do not know, and that matters here. Parents, we shouldn't assume that our teen already knows what seems obvious or common sense, because often they don't. So if you have an autistic child or an autistic teen, you need to slow the meaning making down and get curious first. Before I go any further, I want to come back to the legal side, because this cannot be an afterthought. In some countries and in some states, it may be illegal to buy a sex toy for a minor. So if your child is a minor, go and look up the law where you live. Don't guess, don't assume, check properly. Go and Google, is it legal to buy a sex toy for a 14-year-old or a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old? Doesn't matter what the age is, go and Google it. Is it legal to buy a sex toy for a child X ages in the state and the country that you live in? And look, even if you personally still okay about it, the legal side may mean the answer's no. And if the answer's no because of the law, then that gives you one clear part of your response. Not the whole conversation, but just one part of it. Then the next question becomes, okay, what does my child need from me now in terms of safety, privacy, masturbation education, sensory support, or body information? And that is much more useful for a conversation than just shutting it down and walking away. So, what should you think about before you answer the question? Once you know what your child's asking, and once you've checked the legal side of it, there's a few things want parents to think about. The first is the age and stage. A younger teen and an older teen are not in the same place, even if the words sound similar. And it's sometimes it's never black and white. The second is why they want a sex toy. Are they curious? Are they trying to copy what they think everyone else is doing? Have they seen something online? Are they looking for sensory input? Are they already using something unsafe from around the house, like an electric toothbrush? Because that changes the conversation a lot. The third is whether they're actually mature enough to care for it and use it safely. Can they keep it clean? Can they store it privately? Tell you if it breaks? Can they follow safety instructions? Because this is not a dump and run situation. If a parent allows it, there also needs to be conversation about masturbation, privacy, hygiene, and safe use. And the fourth is your family values. You are allowed to decide something that you're not comfortable with. You are allowed to say no, but the no still needs to come with an explanation, not shame, and that's the difference. Now, what if they're already using something around the house as a sex toy? This part matters because sometimes parents don't get asked first. Sometimes I find out because, their child is already using a household item. I hear from so many parents who say that they discover because they see a pubic hair in their toothbrush or they notice their toothbrush has got a funny smell. And using some household items, they can just be unsafe because they're not designed for genitals and they can actually cause injury or infection. And we're not just talking about values, we're talking about safety as well. What's unsafe? What were they trying to do? Do they need more information? And is the issue sexual curiosity? Are they sensory seeking or is this stress relief? And is a flat no going to make the unsafe workaround just continue and be hidden? Now, that doesn't mean the answer automatically becomes yes. It means a conversation needs more depth. The parents often want to give it in the first 5 seconds. So why does shame make this worse? Over decades of doing this work, one thing I have seen again and again is that shame does not make kids feel safer. It makes them quieter, and that is especially important with autistic kids because many of them already live with a lot of correction, misunderstanding, and people reading more into their behaviour than is actually there. So if your child asks for a sex toy, or if you find out they have one or they're using a household item, and your first response is disgust, panic, or humiliation, what they're learning is not safety. What they're learning is don't bring this to mum or dad again. And that's a problem because the long-term goal here is not to have a child who never says awkward things. The goal is to have a child who still comes to you when something confusing, risky, private, or unsafe comes up, and that's the askable bit. So here's the simple filter I'd use. Pause, do not answer from shock, clarity. Work out what they mean, why they're asking, and whether this is about puberty, sensory needs, curiosity, privacy, masturbation, or something they've seen online. Check the legal side. If it's illegal where you live, that's part of your answer. And if you're divorced as well or separated and their other birth parent is involved, you need to be really, really careful as well to make sure that that other partner is on board. Otherwise, it can be used against you as well. So I just want to warn you about that one. Then you need to think about the age, the maturity of your child, safe use, hygiene, storage, and whether they're already using unsafe household items. And then answer from your values, but without shame. And that might sound like, I'm glad you asked. I want to understand what you mean first. Or they may not be legal where we live, so I need to check that out. Or I'm not angry that you asked, but we do need to talk about privacy, safety, and what your body's actually needing here. And then come back to it, because you do not have to solve the whole thing in one conversation. Smaller, clearer, repeatable conversations usually work better, especially for autistic kids. So, this video is not really about a sex toy, not fully. It's about what your autistic child learns when they bring you a question that makes you feel uncomfortable. Do they learn, I can ask here, even when it's awkward? Do they learn my parent will stay calm enough to help me? And do they learn my body is not shameful and private questions can be talked about? Or do they learn hide this, take it elsewhere and work it out alone? That is why this matters, because a child asking something uncomfortable is not the moment to lose your mind. It's the moment to stay askable. And after all these years in sex education and as a neurodivergent parent myself, that is still one of the biggest differences I see between parents who keep the door open and parents who accidentally shut it. So, if your autistic child or neurodivergent teen asks for a sex toy, do not rush to a yes or a no. Slow it down, work out what they actually mean, check the legal side, think about age, maturity, safety, sensory needs, hygiene, privacy, and values, and then respond in a way that keeps the door open. Because your child, they don't need a perfect parent here. What they need is an askable one.